Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, June 9th, 2025, and today we're going to take on a crop rotation puzzle. We'll discuss increasing your soil's health this summer, and sheep is a complementary livestock to market gardening. We'll see. So let's do it. All right, well, happy Monday to you all. I hope everyone had a lovely weekend. I will actually have more to report about my own weekend tomorrow, as it is not quite entirely over, which will make sense tomorrow. But I hope everyone has had a nice weekend. It cooled off a bit here, so that was very much welcomed after a hot, heavy week of work and sunshine and all the things. More rain came through too, which puts us officially over like 35 or so inches on the year so far. With more rain forecasted this week, we're basically a wannabe ocean. Or a wannabe ocean again. And you get it. Anyway, so you have soil, right? And you could use better soil. Fair. So what can you be doing this summer to help for the future? Well, I know these sorts of conversations usually just end up with something like, just add cover crops. But I will take it a little bit further than that, because the summer is also a time we can do a lot of damage to soil, lose soil organic matter, all the things. So let's do a quick rundown of some of what we can do to protect the soil, but also to improve our soils, not just for next year, but for the next few years. So first, your main job in the summer is keeping your soil carbon bank from dipping too much. What I mean is that you don't want to just spend the carbon and available nutrients in soil without replenishing those somehow. Similar to a bank account, spending all the money and never putting anything back is generally not considered the best approach to finances. That same thing can be applied to soil, and the summer is an excellent time to add to the carbon bank and the nutrient bank. What does that look like? Well, yes, compost is part of it. Add good compost throughout the season as it makes sense, especially for your heavy feeders, but so too is keeping living plant roots in the soil, not just while the crop is growing, obviously, but after the crop is done, i.e. not tearing the tomato roots out if you don't have to, but rather leaving those in the soil to slowly decompose so long as you intend to rotate that space next year and not grow tomatoes again there. Growing as diversely as makes sense is also important. Different plants cultivate different microbes, and the greater diversity of microbes, you can maintain the greater the number of tools the soil has to protect your plants, i.e. those microbes create different enzymes that maybe ward off a bacterium or specific fungi or other pests or whatever. Speaking of tools of protection, it is really important to also be increasingly adding to your ecological habitats without creating ecological traps. As we discussed last Wednesday, go hit up that bird episode with Becca if you have not already. It is real good. The ecologically beneficial actions you take today can take years to come to fruition, but flowers are something that can have an almost immediate impact. Keep something flowering all summer and start building those pest predator populations, but also adding to your soil bank, because flowers are often not in the same family as a lot of the crops that you're growing. So you get a different diversity of microbes, which is all good for the soil bank. And then if you want to improve your garden's health in 5 years, increasing bird and predatory habitats through things like hedgerows and native plants is an easy step to take this year by using the summer to clear those hedges, those hedge areas of weeds. Maybe it's tarping or just good cultivation. And then in the fall, you can go ahead and plant them. Also address compaction and or drainage, depending on your soil and climate. Those issues can take years to remedy. Start broad forking and working in that compost in compacted areas now, and avoid heavy tilling events or working the soil at the wrong time as well, thus adding to the compaction. Mulches can obviously be great for slow release fertility, like Beyond Compost Mulch, which gives you an almost immediate fertility boost. Adding mulches like straw or even hay under the conditions where hay makes sense, that is taking care of the next year's soil while also helping with moisture and soil retention and microbial habitat for this season. And of course, cover crops, but you knew that one already. If you can squeeze a cover crop in there, if only at the end of the season, few things will do a better job of feeding the soil for future health than that. It's hard to work on a moving train, i.e. being in production in the middle of the summer and also trying to build your soil health. But in essence, it's not overly complicated to improve the soil's health this season while you are growing food, but it does require some thoughtfulness and work. Anyway, what other approaches would you all add? Otherwise, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, a cover crop conundrum that may actually be relevant to this topic that I just discussed, now that I'm thinking about it. So that's fun. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Precip. Precip is billed as the easiest way to keep track of rainfall, and that is true, but it is a lot more than that. Sure, you can open the app and immediately see accurate rainfall totals, but you can also save locations to see historical rainfall totals, wind speeds, and all sorts of other nerdy details. Their radar-based technology means you can ditch the rain gauge. I usually have to do that anyway because the kids find a way to smash it with a baseball bat. You can ditch the rain gauge and start tracking rain and other growing conditions all on your phone. Click the link in the show notes to find out more. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Does this show bring you $2 worth of value a month? $5? Consider chipping in. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Garrett Mangini, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I have a question that hopefully you'll enjoy talking through." Probably will. In our context, High Desert Zone 7A, we've landed on growing garlic, onions, and potatoes outside and growing everything else in high tunnels. Shout out to NRCS's financial assistance. I'm wondering how you would consider incorporating cover crops into this 3-year rotation of garlic, potatoes, onions. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that order. I love the idea of overwintered cover crops on as much of our space as possible, yay living roots, but termination seems tricky in time for potatoes and onions to go in the ground, as it's still early enough here that the overwintered grasses are 4 to 8 weeks from milk stage, and the weather isn't terribly warm. And just for the listener, milk stage means that when it is most susceptible and easiest to kill. Potatoes typically go in the ground in mid-April and are harvested out by September 15th. Onions are in the ground by early May and also out by September 15th. Garlic goes in at the end of October and typically comes out in late June/early July. Given this, how might you try to integrate cover crops to maximize their benefit? Extra credit if it allows for a planting of storage carrots and beets to follow the garlic, but that seems like wanting to have the cake and eat it too. We have tarps, a weed whacker, a super fancy T-post crimper, and use of an earthway seeder for cover crops. We haven't invested in a BCS yet and don't see that in the cards in the next 5 years. Thanks, as always, for everything you're adding to the community, end quote. Okay, love this question. Thank you. I love these sort of puzzles. So let's just take this crop by crop. Garlic, when it comes out, much like it does for us in late June/early July, we'll start there. And per your question, there is absolutely no reason you couldn't squeeze a round of storage beets or carrots in after that garlic. Now, if you could get those crops out by the end of September, the carrots or beets or whatever, you could get a winter-killed cover crop in there potentially, but that would be cutting it pretty close in terms of timing unless you went in with a carrot or beet that is closer to 60 to 65 days maturity, which may not store quite as well as some of the 70-plus day carrots, but would last for a while in storage. If the carrots went long, then your only cover crop option at that point really is something that would overwinter, like rye, vetch, crimson clover, etc. Our get-in date being in 6B, so we're really close to you in terms of our hardiness zones, is September 15th. So that's like when we want to get those winter kill cover crops in by. If you're a little further north, it'll be earlier. If you're a little further south, you can get them in later. Like you said, these beds would not be ready to plant until mid to late May if they're in a winter hardy cover crop at earliest, which would rule out one of those other crops for spring, like the onions or potatoes, though you could do a later potato. Maybe that could be a brassica crop or something transplanted that could break up your crop families a little bit in that rotation. For us, that breaker would be something like popcorn or sweet potatoes or winter squash, but it could also be fennel or, like I said, a brassica, whatever other crop that does well in the field for you and is not too intensive to plant. I honestly just think adding a third crop family to your main crop rotation there wouldn't hurt. Whatever you can do to avoid planting one of those alliums after the other one of those alliums within a year's time is probably for the better. Now, after onions and potatoes, you can grow whatever crop you really want, which is nice. After the potatoes, you could even grow a summer cover crop and then terminate that in the late summer and plant your garlic into that. After onions, you could easily do a winter-killed cover crop and have that space ready for potatoes in the spring, followed by that summer cover, and then your garlic, and then a storage beet, winter cover crop, a round of winter squash, a winter-killed cover, and then onions in the spring, radish crop, winter killed cover, and then we're back to potatoes, something like that. I don't know if that was helpful or even a little bit fun to listen to, but I at least enjoyed thinking it through. It was a very, very fun question. Anyway, let me know your all's thoughts and questions and or ideas for how to work with this specific rotation. Otherwise, break time it is, and then sheepies. Be right back.
It's only a dream. Nothing is really what it seems anyway. Now little by little, in the twilight's gentle flow.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe. But what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruits, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join the mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show. Okay, so I do have a favorite animal, and it's not cats. Sorry, Charlie. It's sheep. We rotationally grazed sheep not only during our internships, but also for many years after on our own property. So I thought I would talk a bit about what we learned raising sheep and using them in and around the garden that might be of interest to some of you exploring the idea of employing some livestock. First of all, just in case you are unfamiliar with that term, rotational grazing or management intensive grazing, MIG as it's sometimes called, is when animals are moved frequently into small plots of grass to maximize their impact. Basically, have them graze lightly, stomp the grass to the ground, and add manure in a small area, effectively concentrating the fertility that they are capable of to some extent. The breed we raised was called Katahdins, a hair sheep, which is a kind way of saying a non-wool sheep, or more accurately, a meat breed. And we grazed up to about 25 on 10 acres at the peak of season, give or take, which for that property and the quality of forage that we had there, that was about as many as we could handle. And that wasn't enough sheep to make it profitable, but I'll get there. What I loved about them as a complement to our gardening is that they weren't easy to control. Unlike something like goats, sheep are better about staying where you put them and easier to get back into the fence. Not that sheep don't get out, but they don't actively work to get out like a goat would. We used electric netting charged with a solar energizer, and we moved them every morning to a new paddock. And I enjoyed seeing them every day, getting to watch the baby lammies, running in the morning and evening, all the things. We would use them occasionally in the garden to graze summer and spring cover crops and effectively add to the soil fertility. And because they were lighter than, say, cattle, so long as the soil conditions weren't too wet and their stay was short, their impact was pretty minimal on the soil and, in fact, generally beneficial. And Katahdins in general are easygoing. I only had to assist with 2 births in the 5 years or so that we kept them on our last property. Some of the sheep breeds can be more difficult in that way, but Katahdins are relatively easy. And their parasite issues and things like fly strike are not very common with that breed. With any livestock, you have to be prepared to make some hard decisions, though, if they get sick or severely injured, like by coyotes or something. So you have to have the stomach for it when it comes to raising livestock. But I found the sheep to be a useful tool on our farm and have a great presence in general. However, there were some things not to love. For one, the work was not nothing. Moving the fences, rain, snow, or shine, was a daily chore that was hard to teach someone else to do if you wanted to, say, take a few days off. Having water for them required long hoses and finagling. That wasn't always the most convenient thing. Those things could be managed better, but what was harder to manage on our scale, and why we ultimately had to part with the sheep, was profitability. The sheep were relatively cheap as an enterprise to buy into compared to like a herd of cattle, because a few pregnant ewes are not expensive to buy, and they have a tendency to have twins or triplets, which grows their numbers rapidly. However, even then, sheep simply were not profitable at that scale. In order for sheep to be profitable, i.e. at least not cost you more money than they earn you, some things have to be true. The labor has to be minimal on your part, moving fences, water, etc. Feed that you buy in has to be low. We, for feed, bought in hay to supplement any grass reserves that we were able to build over the summer, which wasn't much because we didn't have enough land, but hay adds up. Arbitrarily speaking, profitability with hair sheep probably doesn't start until around like 100 heads or so, which we did not have the land for. We'd have to have 4 times what we had, which would be like 40 or 50 acres to really feel good about that on the forage quality that we had. But at that point, with enough land, I could see them being profitable and not just selling the meat, but we sold extra starter flocks and charged a little extra to help the sheep get set up and consult on their management with the new buyer, which was a little value add that I thought worked really well for us. There were times we could park them in the barn during ice storms and collect a fair amount of manure for compost as well, so that added some value to the garden. I love what animals like that can do for the land, and we saw a lot of improvement in the time that we were using them, something that is hard to account for economically, but without enough land and without them being the sole focus, it was harder for us to justify them because there was just no profit to be had. They mostly cost us money, or at best they broke even. So whether or not they will work for you will be determined by your property and your goals, the energy you put in, and the forage, and your ability to look at the numbers and determine if they are actually worth the work. I'm a big fan of collaborations, and if you have a little extra land but not the capacity to take on a project like sheep or chickens or cattle or whatever, then maybe having someone else bring their livestock to graze is a better option, because livestock, I should emphasize, are not just another project, but an entirely different enterprise and business. They need their own enterprise budget, marketing plan, business plan, strategic growth plan, all the things. Anyway, thinking about getting sheep, raising them already? Let us know your thoughts. Otherwise, that's it for this Monday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are hearing this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of June, you get a shout out in the show. So big shout outs today to Tossman, not sure where to emphasize on that one, Matt and Madison. All right, so in this week's story, it takes place at a retirement community. This is not like your fancy retirement community. It's not just like a bunch of wealthy people that, happen to save up their whole lives and buy this like really nice place to stay with all their friends or whatever. No, it's actually entirely filled with retired farmers. And the community itself is on a farm, a working farm. The residents, of course, aren't the active farmers. I mean, not really. They are more like the mentors. They can go into the garden and work with the farmers, of course, but what is actually happening is that this place incubates young farmers, giving them the land to start on, a whole slew of retired farmers' brains to pick, and that is all going really smoothly, and everybody is getting something out of it, and the farmers are loving it, and it's all going really smoothly until aliens attack. And that is when the young farmers learn there's more to these old farmers' mentors than meets the eye. That is for tomorrow on the Photon Farmers. Yep, great. All right, we'll see you tomorrow for Tuesday. Sounds like a plan. Thanks for listening and or watching. Bye.